to all our viewers. My name is Divya and I'm a physiotherapist.
And I am Deepa, an occupational therapist working at PlayStreet, India. PlayStreet is an organization that provides educational services to help children with special needs become independent and live up to their potential. We offer parent empowerment programs, an integrated schooling program, and a variety of clinical services.
And in recognition of Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, our focus is firmly set on the profound significance of dyspraxia. We aim for this series to shed some light on the complexities of dyspraxia and address the specific hurdles people with dyspraxia face, and also raise awareness about its importance within the neurodiversity movement. Today, we are on the 11th talk of our series under the segment which focuses on visible effects of dyspraxia. And the topic for today is impact of primitive reflexes and rhythm dysregulation on dyspraxia. And we are honored to have Ms. Reena Singh with us to share her valuable thoughts and information on the same.
Reena Singh is a holistic occupational therapist and the founder of Khushi Therapy Center. She believes that the mind and body are connected and see challenges from a whole person perspective. She combines complementary therapies and integral health techniques in her practice of occupational therapy to help her clients at a deeper level. She believes balance is an integral part of wellness and that alignment of body, mind, and spirit is the key to helping ourselves and our kids. She has worked with neurodiverse kids and their families for the last 23 years. She is also an author of Amazon's bestseller book, Little Parenting Guru, and another one, Looking Beyond Labels, Becoming a Mindful Parent. Her strength lies in blending her roles as a parent and a therapist to offer the best practical strategies to support families who come to her.
Welcome, Ms. Reena. We are very grateful that you have taken time out of your schedule to share your knowledge about the impact of primitive reflexes and rhythm dysregulation on dyspraxia. Can you please share your thoughts for our viewers?
I think it's a very nice topic. I saw the way it has been designed and how it has an impact on various trauma I read, and I see so many beautiful speakers that are lined up. So I feel it's an amazing lineup, and I'm sure everyone who's going to be listening would really benefit from it.
So let's get into the topic. And the first question for you, Ms. Reena, is what are the primary characteristics of dyspraxia, and how do they relate to primitive reflex integration?
Dyspraxia is about the child having a difficulty. Dys is about difficulty. Praxis is about, it has three components actually. It has ideation, it has motor planning, it has execution. So a child or an adult. So if here we are talking about kids here. So yeah, we are talking about kids where dyspraxia is about difficulty in doing tasks which are new, novel tasks, And so whenever a child finds it difficult to participate in tasks which are new, the learning of skills also gets difficult. So that's what dyspraxia is about. Now, now this is all from a sensory integration frame of reference that I'm talking about. So we have a vestibular, we have a proprioceptive, we have a tactile component. This is like the baseline of all the sensory systems. When a child has difficulty with the tactile component, which is associated along with vestibular processing, it's called somatodyspraxia. When it's vestibular and proprioceptive, it's like bilateral integration and sequencing. And there's something called visual dyspraxia, which is more about visual part of it. If I see all three of them, so if I speak not like a therapist, but if I make it very simple, any child who finds it difficult to copy an action. So for example, if I work with a child, and when I'm talking about dyspraxia, yeah, here we are talking about dyspraxia, but when I work with kids, I don't start with, I know that kids have difficulty learning, imitation, planning new things. Yeah, I know that. But I don't start at that level because praxis is more of discrimination, sensory discrimination kind. And a lot of kids, have a lot of difficulty with sensory modulation. So they have a sensory processing challenge. And when there is a sensory modulation disorder, which means, so there is a sensory modulation. If you want me to go into depth, I'll get into it. But if there is a sensory modulation disorder, and there is a sensory based motor disorder, which means kids have difficulty with their postural system and with their ocular motor system. Okay. So till I have not worked on those modulation and the postural bit, I don't, I go into dyspraxia or working on dyspraxia, but that's much later. First, I always address the postural system. So, and how does it relate to primitive reflexes? What happens is, I mean, there are many primitive reflexes, out of which there is one many of them, but this is one reflex, which is called Moro reflex. And there's another one, which is not a primitive reflex. It's an intrauterine reflex called fear paralysis reflex. So fear paralysis reflex is the one which gets transformed into Moro reflex. Now, when these are the reflexes which are present, you know, what happens is, for us, survival is always very important. Okay. And discrimination and all is like secondary. You know what I mean? So if the fear paralysis reflex is present, or if there's a combination of fear paralysis and Moro reflex present, then the sensory modulation is, you see those sensory seeking, craving, avoiding, and, a lot of all of those kinds of things. And so if I am in survival, worried about survival and living, I wouldn't be worried about planning, and dyspraxia or motor planning or any of those kinds of things. So the first thing that I usually work upon with kids is working on the postural system, working on the sensory modulation difficulties. And along with these, I'm working on integrating there are many reflexes, but the main thing that I work upon is the fear paralysis and the Moro. Because when they start getting integrated, and no reflex ever gets, integrated. No, it never happens. Because if I can give you an example. So I was at a trek, okay, and it was like a Himalayan trek, and there were mules that were carrying those weights, and everybody, we had this instruction: whenever a mule, the pack that comes, then you have to move on to the side, let the mules go first. And we used to be like, and I used to be like, wow, they have such good eyes. Oh, that's so good. Oh, that's so good. I kept on saying that. And I think it was a 6-day trek. So 5 days, I was like, wow, 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 mules are good, mules are good, mules are good. I went on doing that. Now, the last day, we were coming back and our trek was over. And I did give way for the mules to go. And there were 2 of them that went straight, and the third one came towards me. And I was like, oh my God. And I was frozen there. I didn't know what to do. And there was somebody who pulled me. Now, in that zone, that state that where I entered into is more like a fear paralysis kind of a thing, a more, what I would say, mature form of Moro, not like typical freeze, what you would see. But what I'm trying to convey by saying this is, so I was there in that state for some time, like, oh, and I was back again. So we all have this thing that we can, we get into those states and we can recover back. But for kids, they are not able to recover back that fast. And most of the times, they are into that fight, flight, freeze state. So, and I'm talking specifically here with respect to autism. Okay. And again, autism as a spectrum is a very broad. So I'm not talking that every child is in that zone. Every child is different. But I'm talking about a general thing that if I'm talking about dyspraxia, I don't touch praxis and other things till I have worked on modulation, till I have worked on Moro, till I have worked on fear paralysis reflex. And along with it, I just don't use only primitive reflexes, but I can add up maybe the auditory part of it. So maybe a therapeutic listening, maybe a safe and sound protocol, whatever. My main aim is that I can work on praxis when a child comes out of that protection mode into a, like, the child is with me. But when I start, they are into their own zone, they are into their own space, and I can't work on, and even if I teach them, okay, clap hands or do whatever, they would learn it, but it's not what I actually, that's not how praxis, what you say, that's not how I work, basically. It's very different. So I don't know if this helps you, but basically when I talk about praxis, it's about planning new action. So if I tell a child clap hands, they find it difficult. If I tell them jump, and again, some kids, some parents work on it. Okay, this is how you jump. Okay, this is how you do a forward jump. This is how you do a backward jump. This is how you do a sideward jump. This is how you do a reciprocal stride. They teach it all. And then this child comes to me and I'm doing some new action. They can't do it. But those ones that they've learned over and over and over again, they can do it. So I know, because anything that's new, and you can make out that, oh, this is a learned skill, this is because it's been practiced so many times. So what I'm trying to convey is anything which affects skill development, because finally you learn things so that you can make it into skill. So function gets affected. It could be in your in the child's day-to-day living, maybe buttoning a shirt, maybe things like how you use a pencil, maybe how you use a paintbrush, how much force and all would be more about modulation, but dyspraxia would be anything that I would do skillfully, and in my functional, as an occupational therapist, what is the role of a child? To be able to sit in the class and study. So writing, it would be difficult for the child to form those letters. Parents tell me that he can write an A and he knows he can copy A, B, C, D. But if I say write, like, it's difficult. If you write A 10 times, then the 11th time they find it difficult to do it. So that's how it can come in writing. It can come in self-help skills. It can come in kicking a ball, throwing a ball, catching a ball, anything that requires planning. That gets difficult. Does that help?
How you integrated dyspraxia and the reflex together, it gave a very insightful knowledge. And I think when I work in my clinicals, it's going to be quite useful. So with that, also, ma'am, like, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, actually, when ma'am, you're telling about the postural problems that you will address, that actually helped me as well, because in my sessions I use postural correction exercises. So it actually is very informative for me. And so, ma'am, I have another question. If the remedial approaches that you implement in your work doesn't help, then what sort of adaptive approaches do you use for the children with autism and dyspraxia?
So I've never used a remedial approach. And again, maybe I'm misunderstanding. Remedial means I do and the child copies. So when I started working initially, I was very much influenced by ABA, and they used to have a lot of motor imitations. Okay, I clap and the child claps. I do this, the child does it. I do this, the child does, like everything has imitations. And I was like, wow, this is how they do it. And I knew about planning and I knew about imitations. And I was like trying to find out the link between the two when I started. So when the parents went to the therapy centers and they did those actions, do this, touch your ear, whatever, that's more like a remedial kind of a thing. I come from a sensory integration perspective where the focus is not on skill building. The focus is on, ensuring that the nervous system or the brain is feeling more organized. Because when the brain feels organized and in harmony, in balance, when that happens, then the child is available to learn things easily. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to convey. So a lot of these kids, so, I do what us in my practice, I have a lot of kids where I do mentoring. So when I say mentoring, I started working with this girl who comes to my mind, where she was into her own space. She would not look. She would keep flapping her arms. She would keep, jumping and pacing. And that's all that she would do. So all my work was only to work on the sensory modulation and to work on the, the developmental movement patterns. Like, there's something called prone extension, supine flexion, lateral flexion, trunk rotation. So these are the main, what you call, blocks of movements, which are like ABCD, you know, for the movement. So what if in most kids, not again, I won't generalize, but in many kids, the prone extension is difficult to assume. The supine flexion is difficult. Now, why is this difficult? Because the vestibular system has many connections, but one connection that goes is to the muscles of the back, you know. So when I'm working, and again, if you see TLR, the tonic labyrinthine reflex. So what I'm trying to convey is, with this girl, all that we worked upon was activating and strengthening those postural movements which need to be embedded into the body, while we worked on the modulation challenges. So if there was a sound, she would cover her ears. If the swing was, if we swing, she would start flapping and start pacing around. So every time that she would flap, I know, oh, she's not able to process the vestibular input. We would give something like a proprioceptive or a deep pressure, get her back to vestibular. So what I'm trying to convey is, as we worked with helping the child to process the vestibular input well, as that started happening, and as we worked on these developmental movement patterns, this child, the window of arousal that we talk about, you know, the child was more and more regulated. The child was more and more available with us. And additionally, along with it, I always also add up therapeutic listening, because I want to support sensory integration with the auditory blend. So when we combined all of it, it took us like 6-8 months. And by then, you know, what happened is, now she's more available. She looks at us, whatever we do. So we start with bigger movements, maybe just bouncing on a ball, and then she bounces on the ball. So now what I'm saying is, the development happens like how it happens with any other child. I mean, if I talk about babies, they copy at what, 3 months, you know, babies get their tongue out, you get your tongue out, and they're like, wow, they're copying. So that mirror neurons that they have is amazing. I mean, you know, but what I'm saying is, so I'm not talking about remediation here, but what I'm saying is, I do it that way. I address the sensory modulation. I expand that, window of tolerance where the child is comfortable with the demand that we put on the child. And as that demand and that band gets bigger, that's when I start adding up, you know, praxis or planning related activities. So that's how I work along. But I definitely add up the auditory bit of it, because without auditory and yeah, other things that I do also are, as I said earlier, the fear paralysis reflex. So there are certain exercises which I feel are very helpful when we do. And that gets, I mean, most parents tell me when we do that, I see the child is more available. So what I'm doing is I'm combining them, and then I get into the praxis part of it, and I see it just starts coming very easily. In fact, with the same girl, so it was around 6-9 months back where it was so difficult, but now whatever the dad will do, she can copy. And she is also now aware that what is it, you know, like what I'm saying is, copying is not just about copying everything, you know. Like, for example, if I was doing Zumba once and I was dancing, okay, and this person has a way of doing his hands like this, and I have a way of doing my hand differently. So, you know, I am okay with my version of imitation. So that way, this girl is now getting comfortable that, you know, when I do this, it's not this, I can do this also. So she's developing her own version, and now she's starting to interact with kids. And also what I'm saying is, I don't start with praxis as my first thing. I don't do that. Yeah. Does that give you an idea?
Yes, yes, it gave. Yeah, it actually helps a lot. You have given more than what actually we were thinking of. It actually has given an innovative thought for us. We never thought of this perspective first. So we are learning something new now. So thank you for that.
Like, one thing you said is like you expand the sensory modulation part also. That is what we, as like when we trying to, like when I work currently right now, I don't really think of it that I need to, you know, extend it so that the child comes into that zone, that they have their own version of doing things. And then like what as therapists, what we do is like what I'm doing, which I should be able to imitate the same.
Yeah.
This gives a very good insight as to that I can introspect and, you know, again, change things the way you are doing currently. Help
Yeah.
me in my sessions as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Ma'am, one more thing, like, can dyspraxia be effectively managed? Like, if there is any early intervention that would be focusing just on primitive reflexes, can it be managed that way?
So I don't see, see, if you see Khushi, if I talk about Khushi, if you see my center, the what you call the logo is a puzzle piece, if you see that. So I believe primitive reflex is one part of the puzzle. Sensory integration is one part of the puzzle. Auditory is one part of the puzzle. Like it's like visual strategies is one part of the puzzle. So I can't say that only doing primitive reflexes you'll integrate. No, not at all. But does that help? Yes, of course it does. So it's a very good way because I, like when I started learning about primitive reflexes, I used to be like, wow, this is the missing piece. This is all. And I did that and I realized, and I did actually do it. I took some kids where I just did work on primitive reflexes. With other kids, I did a combination. And again, I think as a therapist, as I worked, I evolved because, when the primitive reflexes, if you see in typical development, when they get integrated for that matter, they get integrated, they get not integrated, I would say, but they become a part of my body system. They have to transform into something. You know what I'm saying? Like if I have a Babkin reflex for that matter, where I press in the center and the child will open the mouth or whatever, that kind. Now, Babkin does transform into lifelong bonding reflex, and bonding is something that will stay. So I won't ever say that they get. So I'll give you one example. So my father-in-law has he's passed away at 75. He had dementia, Alzheimer's. And I remember at 75, he got a stroke and he developed and he became quadriplegic. Everything was like paralyzed. All that I did was I checked out which are the primitive reflexes because they all came back. Everything came back. Lot of things we worked upon, and I mean, we did a lot of work. He got better. He started walking, everything. And then my mother-in-law once told me, Papa has got into this habit and he keeps his tongue like this, okay? And I was like, oh, Reena, you didn't work on Babkin. And then for a few days, I worked on Babkin. Even that got integrated. So what I'm saying is it never, oh, it's gone, it's integrated. No, it's there. It's dormant. And ever if I need something, if there's a lot of stress and if my higher level brain, I won't say higher level brain, because brain is like what you call, it's like a building, there was a brainstem and then the cortex build in and all. If as and when we evolved phylogenetically, if we didn't need the brainstem, if we didn't need the cortex, the brain could have left it all, but no, we are carrying that entire architecture with us because the lower structures need to get fully integrated so that they can support the functioning of the higher structures. But if there's an insult to the higher structures, these lower ones would come into, like, oh, we need to take care of you kind that way. So I would never say that, yeah, if I just integrate the primitive reflexes, things get better. No, because in my experience, I have worked and I did integrate a few primitive reflexes, but I didn't work on the postural reflexes. I didn't strengthen the postural reflexes. So they came back again because there was nothing. Where would it go? It has to, it's like it has to go somewhere, no? The primitive reflexes, if you see in regular typical development, postural reflexes are lifelong reflexes, the writing reactions, the equilibrium reactions. But if they are not developed, and if I'm just integrating primitive reflexes, it doesn't help. So your question is, would just integrating primitive reflexes? No, it's a part of the puzzle. Primitive reflex, postural reflex. I mean, everything has to be worked together. In fact, even diet plays a very big role. This girl that I spoke about who started planning, she was in that zombie state, and everybody was like, she's lost into her own world. But the gluten in her body and the casein in her body, and I'm not saying everybody needs GFCF, but this girl specifically needed. So when we removed that gluten and casein, we found that she was more aware. And when she was more aware, then we added the, if you see links to space and like we added up space related music. So she gets even more aware. So what I'm saying is only primitive reflexes? No. A combination of everything? Yes, that's what would help. Definitely would help.
With whatever you've said, like told us right now, we should understand as parents, as therapists as well, that a holistic approach is what is going to help us. Right? Just working on
It's
primitive.
It's like, see, we are not just like what you call, we are not just eyes, or we are not just nose, we are not just hands, we are not just feet, we are not just a back. Whatever you do, it'll impact everything. I mean, if the child doesn't sleep well, it'll impact everything, regulation, everything. So yeah, that's why only primitive reflexes, no, not just that, but combination, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. So with that, we'll move to the next question, which is like, can clinical and functional home activities be designed in a way in which the sensory integration and primitive reflex integration can be achieved together?
Of course. Of course, of course. You mean, so your question, let me understand it. Can we do activities at the clinic and at home where we teach parents so that we can help kids, right? That's what you're saying. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, of course. So, I mean, earlier, if you see in my practice, it was more about working with kids, working with kids. I still do those kinds of what you call, I still do a lot of workshops, but a lot of my work is now about teaching parents, and parents follow the program, and we meet on a weekly, monthly, or whatever basis. And when we do that, yeah, huge differences, huge differences. But it's not talking. So it's not about what you call, like, I won't say, okay, you get your child to jump on a trampoline, or you get, no, not that kind. It's more of where a parent is actually working with their child. They take a video. We do like a 30-minute video, and then we observe and we're like, oh, see here, your child is not regulated. And parents really get trained very well. They're beautiful because, they find, oh, I'm swinging too fast and my child is going, ah, they stop the swing. They get the child down, they get into deep pressure, they get into proprioception. They find, oh, my child is again regulated, they get them back. So this attunement constantly. So it's not like, oh, I give deep pressure for 10 minutes. Oh, I give whatever, vestibular for 10 minutes. No, they're constantly attuning, and it's an ongoing thing. It really works miraculously. It does work.
Actually, there is the importance of how the parents' understanding of the therapies also. So this is very important because parents also play a big role. They need to know how to regulate when this is happening, and need to know what is happening in the back end of the child when he or she is dysregulated. Like, okay, this is what is happening. That thought is actually very important from the parents' side. So it's always from the therapist side, but the parents knowing that is something very important, and we learned that. So maybe we can use it for our parent education sometime.
Yeah,
And
sorry, go ahead.
please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So what I feel is that, yeah, parent education is very important. But earlier I used to train them in like, oh, do this vestibular, oh, do this proprioceptive. But then I realized, no, they're getting anxious. They're getting irritated. They're getting frustrated. They're like humans, I mean, we are all humans, but so working on addressing that part, key, and it's okay to feel frustrated. Like somewhere it's like that permission is only not given, key, oh, no, I have to help my child, oh, I have to do this, oh, I have to always stay happy, oh, and there's a lot of pressure. But where the child, where the parent feels it's okay, because most of the times it's not just the vestibular, proprioceptive, tactile, it's a lot of prompting. Come on, do it. Yes, come here. Very good. You're doing it nice. Yeah. So I tell them, see, you have to be aware and mindful of your state. Because if you're not aware of your state is what is being passed on to your child. That's co-regulation, right? So then they start, I think everybody can learn. All parents learn, at least the ones that I know and I work with. I'm sure everybody, I mean, the ones that I'm talking about are fantastic. And they all started with like, oh, my child doesn't do this. Oh, my child doesn't do that. And now they're like, it's okay, he doesn't do that. But, he tried this new thing. It's okay, he doesn't do that. But, he's doing this. They go to a point where they say, yeah, he was having a big tantrum. But you know what? I was calm. I could keep myself, available. I could hold space for my child. So now they are, so what I feel is the biggest transformation that happens here is in the parents.
Exactly.
So that's what is needed.
Yeah. And Ms. Reena, can you tell me the role and importance of rhythm movement and rhythmic patterns in this primitive reflex integration, and how you can use that in the sessions?
So rhythm is a very, 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 very big thing, because everything is in a rhythm, you know, I mean, heartbeats in a rhythm, breathing is in a rhythm. And if that rhythm is disrupted, everything is disrupted. So when I talk about rhythm, yeah, there are certain rhythmic movements that I work upon, definitely. I use a lot of rhythm in a swing, because if you put your swing in a, like if you're doing a vestibular input or maybe on a ball, if you're just rhythmically moving forwards and backwards, if you're doing a rhythmical swinging, if you're doing a rhythmic movement with a child, anything where you're talking in a rhythm, because right now I'm in a rhythm, but I can talk to you like, what's happening? Okay, tell me. Yeah, this is not rhythmic, you know. So what we call as therapeutic use of self, that how am I using my voice? How am I using my gestures? If I'm like, come on, do it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Come on. Yeah, yeah. So these fast, this kind of a thing when I do, the voice, if it's, so what I feel is rhythm is in the body. I can provide that through a vestibular input. I can do that while I'm singing a song and I'm doing an activity with a child, like a vestibular activity. I can use the rhythm through a auditory intervention. You know, I can do that way. So rhythm is extremely, the main rhythmic thing that I am very mindful of is the breathing of the child. Because when I see them not breathing, when I'm doing an exercise, when I see them that they're holding their breath, that's when I know, oh, something is not going right here. So I feel the rhythm is everywhere, in the music, in my voice, in the vestibular input, in the breath, everywhere. And if the rhythm is disturbed, yeah, everything is disturbed, because rhythm will help me to feel more regulated. And if I'm not rhythmic, the child would be dysregulated, you know.
So how does this impact motor planning and motor coordination as well?
The rhythm,
Yes. Do you
because
feel that it will impact?
say that again.
Do you feel that it would impact motor coordination and motor planning, like rhythmic dysregulation?
Of course, because see, when you're giving a rhythmic input, I'm talking about a vestibular input or whatever, rhythm is in the cerebellum, and cerebellum is about balance and coordination. So it's going to directly impact, you know, the more rhythmic activities that I do. So as I said, I mainly work on modulation and those posture and stuff like that. If I'm working there, you know, and I'm not saying posture meaning correction or whatever. I'm talking about everything from the context of vestibular in the background. Yeah. But if I'm working on all of those, and if I'm ensuring that's all rhythmic, that puts my child into a state of regulation, what we call as optimum arousal. So if the child is in that zone, he's ready to learn. You know, we learn when we are feeling regulated. We don't learn when we are dysregulated. So it would impact coordination in a big way. And also because it directly impacts the cerebellum, you know.
Yes. That actually explains so much. And do you think that it would show up in their functional life also? Will that affect their functional life activities and their daily activities?
What would show up in the functional life?
Rhythmic dysregulation?
Yeah, everywhere. As I said, it's not just eyes or whatever. And so if the Reena I am in front of you is the Reena who will be the wife, who will be the mother, that is who I will be everywhere. So yeah, it would impact the day-to-day whatever. So what I was saying was the rhythm, the function definitely gets affected. And as an occupational therapist, my work is only about function. You know, the child has to get comfortable or has to become competent, not comfortable in all the daily living skills, you know, eating, dressing, grooming, bathing, toileting, whatever the role of that student is, be a student, be a friend, you know, interact with others, manage your emotions, everything. So it does impact every area. But if I see it positively, when the child is more regulated, that also what you say spreads across all the areas, and the child feels, oh, I can do this. Oh, I was not able to do this earlier. Oh, I can do that now. So when a child is able to be regulated and participate in the daily tasks, there is that competence and that, wow, I could do it. You know, that self concept that gets feels better. And so the intrinsic motivation to participate in those activities also gets better. So it's a very beautiful, what you call cascade, you know, like one leading to the other. So yeah, it does impact, you know, the function.
This actually can give so much of information for every therapist, not just an occupational therapist. It even helps the physiotherapist as well because it also impacts our goals which we have for the children. So thanks for this.
Ma'am, like how can we establish a therapeutic rhythm, like for timing, pacing, and synchrony, along with sensory integration and reflex integration?
How can you establish a therapeutic rhythm you're
Rhythm.
talking about? Okay. So when I'm talking about a rhythm, I don't know which context you're talking about a rhythm because rhythm is such a broad thing. But rhythm for me is more about giving more. See, the nervous system loves predictability. The brain loves predictability. So rhythm would make them feel, oh, after this is going to happen or whatever. So, and I'm talking about how I do my sessions. So if I'm doing a swinging with a child, for example, then if I'm telling them, okay, let's do 10 counts and then it's done. But before 10 also, if I find the child is not comfortable, I would take the child down. But if the child wants to keep swinging, I have, okay, 1, 2, and the child comes down. And so there's a rhythm. I won't say it's a rhythm. It's a, he knows that every time I use a certain word or if I use a certain gesture, that means I need to transition or I need to reference or I need to, how do I say it? It's more of like a non-verbal uh, communication that's going on between us. So that's the kind of a rhythm that I'm talking about. And I don't know which rhythm you mean here. But does that answer? I mean, I don't know what your question is like.
And like with movement, like it answers the question that I'm asking, but again, like with timing, like you said, when you tell them like 1, 2, 3, and so they come down, right? So again, when it comes to synchronizing, like when we are integrating both the primitive reflex and the sensory integration together, like so again, it's a rhythm-based activity that's going on. So does in a way does that rhythm like for the therapeutic rhythm like does that help with the timing and pacing or synchronizing the activities that needs to be done together?
So if I'm talking about a rhythm in if I'm talking about rhythm in an auditory context, yeah, that is yes. But I feel the one thing, big thing that will help with the rhythm is the vestibular input. And when I say vestibular input, so if I play a song, for example, and if I do a simple head to toe rocking, where I'm just going down and I come up and sit, simple head to toe rocking, that's what I do. So if I have a song which goes dee ding, dee ding, dee ding, dee ding, suppose if it goes that way, then I go that fast. If it goes dee ding, dee ding, then I go slow. So the rhythm is in the body. If I do simple things like basic example is birdie dance. What is that? Then it goes so there's a rhythm that the child has to feel in the body along with the vestibular, along with the auditory input that the child is receiving. Yeah, so it definitely does help. There's a whole thing called interactive metronome that people do, where there is a rhythm and the child has to do the action on the basis of that particular rhythm. If you just play a metronome also in the background, just a metronome, like even that helps. So even simple things like, quick shift musics, if I take from therapeutic listening. And again, depending on what my goal is, if my goal is focus or whatever, but if my goal is around, if I play that music in the background, it does give that kind of a, what you call predictability. That's not much about rhythm, but I feel the rhythm, the way I use is more about my activities are in sync with the music that's going on. If the music is fast, my activities are fast. If the music is slow, I go slow. Kids take time, they get there, but that's again not the place where I start in the beginning because I want the child to be available to, like the child has to, I can't tell me, look at me, now do this, now copy that, because it can't become an instruction based, what you call therapeutic process. It has to be more of play, everything has to happen in the context of play. So if I do like, oh, that's happening, come, let's do it this way. It's all fun, 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 fun. And the child would do it. So for that, the child has to be in that regulation zone, where he's ready to copy me or whatever. So I would need a lot of rhythm initially so that the modulation difficulties are like, cleaned up, and then I can address praxis using rhythm in the background. Yeah.
That's my question. Addresses it.
And ma'am, I would like to ask a question. Like when you're saying that they'll have to tune in with the rhythm which is playing, which that can be in their pace, but they just have to tune in with it. So how would that affect the coordination, like in a good way? How would that improve coordination sequencing?
Because I feel our body is meant to move in a rhythm. That's how it is intrinsically made, I mean, on that day, I was trying to get the hoopla, and how you move around so you can get that hoopla to go around your stomach and all. I was doing it. Okay, and I was doing it without the music, and I was not able to do it. It kept falling down. And I played some nice song which had a rhythm, and my hoopla stayed there. Because my body moves to the rhythm, and the coordination automatically, you just bring it online. It's a, what you call, it's a function that's already in us, and with rhythm it kind of comes to the surface, is what I feel. And that's exactly what happens with the kids also. I can't do it at the what you call, at the belly for them, but even things like if I put a hoopla around my hand and I go tee ding tee ding tee ding, whatever, if I play it, it helps, the rhythm helps. Or if I just say, okay, move it round and round, okay, very good, 5 counts, okay, move it, it's so boring, and the child won't even enjoy. But if there's a music in the background, whoa, full involvement. Children love it.
Yes, yes. Maybe actually music also plays a big role in this, as you're saying now. And do you think that there is a technique of this rhythm auditory cueing for a child to simplify a motor plan? Like we can use to simplify a motor plan. Can we use this auditory cues for that?
So I don't know what you mean by auditory cues. What comes to my mind is, if there is a sound, the child has to first localize and orient. Oh, that's where the sound came from. Oh, so it's like a movement where I'm like actually orienting towards it. If those patterns are not there in the body, what I mean is, if you see kids, they move like this. So it's like, okay, this side, okay, this side. There's no this kind of a movement, or there's no midline, what you call, rotation happening very easily, or trunk rotation happening very easily. And most of our auditory orienting is around, you can do it when you move, like, oh, what was that? Oh, that. Acha, what was that? So what I feel is, if the pattern has to be first embodied in the body, and that's afterwards I can get into auditory cueing if you're talking about an instruction based kind of a thing. But if the child is not able to orient to the source of the sound, if the child is not able to understand where is the sound coming from, what is that sound all about, then the sound would be more of a threat. Oh my God, what is that? Instead of helping with motor planning. So that's why I keep talking about address the modulation piece before I get into it. But if I talk about auditory, using the safe and sound protocol, yes, it does help to a great extent. If I use therapeutic listening, and if I go from that side of space music, the spatial perception helps immensely. So what I'm trying to talk about is clearing the sensory modulation issues, working on the postural, the whatever that I mentioned, prone extension, supine flexion, adding up the auditory part. And once all that is in place, and I'm getting those, the what you call, the movement patterns which are around where I cross the midline basically. And not because I'm teaching them, okay, do cross crawls and they get it. No, but it comes naturally, because that can't be taught. If you're teaching them, yeah, they can do it, but it's not what you feel it in your body. These concepts have to be embodied. You have to feel them to use them. So does that help you? What I mean, I don't know if
Yes,
that's
that helps, madam, because those movement has to be intrinsic, as you're saying, not
exactly.
me making them passively do it. That wouldn't help the child.
No.
Yes.
Yeah, facilitating them and moving towards those, patterns, you know.
Yeah, correct. That makes sense.
And so with that, can you help us understand the relationship between sensory processing and motor coordination with the context of dyspraxia?
So sensory processing disorder has dyspraxia in it. You know what I mean? Like if you see sensory processing disorder, it has sensory, what is that? It has, what is the first one? Over and under responsive. It has the postural one. It has the discrimination one. And in the postural one is dyspraxia. So they're not two, what you call separate things. Yeah, they are a part. The dyspraxia is a part of the sensory processing challenge. You know, what was the other thing that you mentioned? You spoke about something else.
And motor coordination.
Motor coordination. So motor coordination, you know, praxis or planning. Now, if I talk about motor coordination in other diagnoses, which are not about sensory processing, that's very different because that may have to do with so many other things. Maybe my muscles are not working well. Maybe you know, there are many other things, but you're in dyspraxia, everything is working well, you know, the muscles are fine. You know, it's just the idea of how to do it and how to plan it is difficult. The muscle strength is good. The eyes are working. Eyes are not working fine because if it's a postural based oculomotor disorder, yeah, there's a difference there. But what I'm trying to tell you is a motor coordination issue could be from various other reasons. Could be because of maybe the nerve has got cut or it's the muscle that's not working well or the muscle strength is not well, but dyspraxia is not about any of those things. It's assuming and it's with the hypothesis that everything is working well, but the plan of how to do it is not in place. So they're very different. So sensory processing has dyspraxia under it as a subcategory, but coordination may be impacted. Yeah, definitely. But if I see it as a clinical thing, motor coordination is a separate thing altogether.
Thank you. And like in your experience, what are some of the promising approaches or some advancement in occupational therapy that address sensory regulation issues in individual with dyspraxia or autism together?
I feel so when I became an occupational therapist and I think I did my sensory integration course in somewhere in 2004. Okay. And I was like, okay, done, sensory integration course done. Now let's do primitive reflex. Okay, let's do therapeutic listening. Let's do, I don't know, so many other things I did. But every time that I did every other course, I kept coming back to sensory integration and the concept by Dr. Jean Ayers because I feel it's so rich. It's so complex because, you know, what I understood about sensory integration in 2004 and what I understood about sensory integration in 2008 was like, oh my God, she thought of this also. Okay, then 2010, oh my God, she thought of this also. So in those days, the kind of things that she spoke about, the kind of connections that she spoke about, now we are getting the what you call, you know, papers which are talking about, oh, this is what it is. And Jean Ayers had already spoken about that as a hypothesis, but everything is now being proven. So I feel it, according to me, the thing that helped me the most, which I still am refining, you know, every single day, even now I'm reading about sensory integration because there is such a lot of depth to it. And if we understand as therapists the depth to it and understand which piece to address when, I think things get better. You know, like again, another thing is that when you're asking me all of these, usually it's like a question and answer session. That's how we call it. But I mean, after reading and going through all of this, I feel it's not a question and answer session. It's your question and it's just my perspective because someone else that you speak to will have a different perspective. And there are going to be so many different answers, and all of them are the right answers according to what we have, you know, learned in the last so many years or we've been practicing. So for me, even till today, it's sensory integration. You know, it's the recent advancement, you call it or whatever, that's where the base is, you know, that's where everything comes into place, I feel.
Yeah, that is going to be something innovative for us because we have never just kept it like an isolated subject. So now when we can connect all the dots, like we always see that it's just sensory integration as our one subject. But when we can keep that and use that approach in every other advancement, it actually shows a different impact, which
Yeah.
we
Yeah, and you know what? I feel it's like I feel I'm like one of those blind men, the 7 blind men who went to see the elephant, and one blind man said, "Oh, the elephant is like a pillar." The other one said, "Oh, it's like a fan." The other one said, "No, it's like a rope." So I think now I'm seeing what I saw about sensory integration was like, "Oh, it's just a pillar." Then I'm like, "No, no, no, sensory integration is a rope." No, no, no. So now I'm starting to get an idea about what the elephant looks like. You know what I'm saying? It's like after so many years, oh, this is sensory integration. So it has a lot of depth. The deeper we go, the more conversations we have, the more you work, and the more what you call improvements you see. It's like, oh yeah, I knew about this. Oh, I had to just do this, and that's what it helps. So that's the one very important thing, and even primitive reflex integration, because as a child, I had a lot of sensory challenges, but I didn't have a sensory processing disorder. I didn't have that. And I was like, why am I the way I am? And it was because of a lot of trauma that I went through as a child. So my moro reflex, my spinal gallant reflex, my, what is the other one? Tonic labyrinthine reflex were the ones which were unintegrated. So when I worked on myself and integrated those reflexes, it's not that they are integrated completely, but I also worked on, as I said, parents feel frustrated, parents feel angry. I felt angry, I felt frustrated. And all of that anger and frustration, as a parent, I throw it on the person who I love the most, which is my child. So what I feel is what helps the most is threefold thing. Yes, sensory integration. I do the primitive reflex integration, but the main thing is I work on myself. Because if I don't work on myself, I can't help anybody, even if I have the best of knowledge from all of these domains. Because I have to stay regulated if I want to regulate my child. And this is what I learned from my son when he was born and when he had his challenges. And I was like, Reena, you have to calm down. You have to calm down. Because, it was easy for me as a therapist to sit in the clinic and work with kids because I was not emotionally invested in their kids. It was like, okay, do this and go. But when it was my child, I was expecting too much more, too much. And so it became easier for me to understand that, oh, parents are going through a lot of emotional stuff which they're not able to share. On top of it, they have to learn these exercises and then do the exercises on a child who's not cooperating, who's going to throw tantrums and who's going to tell you you're a bad mother. It's not easy. It's very difficult. So I think it's combination of everything. So does that help? The question
Yes,
was.
it helps. It helps million words actually what you said, because when we are not in a place to help ourselves, we cannot help others. That
Yeah,
speaks so much. And
yeah.
ma'am, can you help us understand about whole body approach, and do you believe in that whole body approach can be recommended for children with autism and dyspraxia instead of just focusing on one skill of speech or just fine motor skills? Do you believe that whole body approach can work?
Yeah, because as I told you earlier, that sensory integration or even occupational therapy for that matter is a holistic thing. It doesn't believe in, oh, we are working for the hands, oh, we are working for the eyes. No, 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 no. I mean, I don't know now how occupational therapy is, but we had a lot of mental health as a part of our subject in details. So it's not just the body, it's body, mind, and spirit combined together. So it is the whole body approach. um, I can't work on fine motors when the child has not slept well, child has not eaten well, child is not passing motions well, child is not eating all kinds of food. I have to take care of everything. Yeah. And that's why multidisciplinary approach helps, of course, because I can't prescribe a diet. I can't help with the speech. Sometimes kids have no way to communicate at all, they're nonverbal. So there has to be a speech therapist who has to give something like a PEX or a sign language or an AAC device so that there's some way to communicate till the child becomes verbal. So yeah, I feel the multidisciplinary approach and the whole body approach is what it is. Yeah. You cannot separate. We are one system. When they talk of something like even brain body connections, I don't know if you know this term. The people use it a lot, brain body connections. And I used to wonder, but brain is in the body, right? I mean, it's the full body. Why do you keep talking about brain body? So we have to work on the full body. And this is the body that's going to hold on to the emotions. This is the body that's going to hold on to everything. So yeah, everything we have to work upon and target.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So on behalf of our PlayStreet team, I would like to thank you and for taking time out to share your insights and your expertise today with us. Your perspective has definitely added a lot of value and depth to our understanding on impact of dyspraxia, impact of primitive reflex, and rhythm distribution on dyspraxia. So to our viewers also, we would hope you found this interview insightful. And if you have any questions or would like to share your thoughts, please feel free to connect with us.
So thank you for allowing me and for inviting me here. Those who are listening to me, I would like to tell you that I have my app coming up. In fact, when this is going to get aired, my app is already would be live. So if you just check autism with an AWE, autism insights, that's what it is called.
For sure. Yeah, and so we'll end with about a small info about dyspraxia program, which we have at PlayStreet, which encompasses an intensive OT, ST, and PT, also with programs like co-regulation and upbeat. So if you feel whoever is watching this dyspraxia program, please feel free to connect to us. If you feel that your child has dyspraxia, connect to us for further details regarding this program. And thank you so much, Reena ma'am, for giving so much of insightful words. And thank you, viewers, whoever has joined and been part of this conversation.
Thank you.